No, true story. Some of you, I wasn't the only witness, but the dinner had started in here, and some of us got a very, very, very large glass of scotch. I love that bartender. Okay, I'm just telling you. Went out on the patio because it was so beautiful, and I'm not kidding you, in the first 15 minutes that we were out there, and I don't know, there was probably maybe a dozen folks out there, we saw 3 UFOs. Now, I'm not making this up, and I'm not the guy that's going to lie to you about UFO sightings, all right? One of the people that was with me is from Iceland, and he really doesn't know much about astronomy, and so we were I was trying to yeah, that's the Big Dipper, and he goes, hey, what's that moving? Well, it was a satellite, at least we thought, right? So the first thing that we saw was, star-like object moving in a straight line, kind of cutting across the Big Dipper. And so I'm telling him, well, that's a satellite. Watch it, make sure that it stays on a straight path, because a lot of UFOs are, star-like objects that you see in there, but they're doing weird stuff. And so then a couple seconds later, while we're still watching that one, there's another one starts coming into view. So we got 2 satellites streaking across the Big Dipper. The first satellite that we were watching, if I can do this with one hand, it's up here, and the second one is down here. The first one goes like that, and not abruptly. It wasn't a right angle turn, but it was in a very short period of time, a complete 90-degree turn going the other direction. As it moves this way, then the second one, which probably was a satellite, comes across, and it's actually on top now because the other one went down that direction. And I'm like, oh, that's not a satellite. They don't do that, okay? So while we're looking at this, and the one, the strange object kind of keeps going in the distance and vanishes, one of the people that were at the table over here goes, what's that orange light? So we all turn and we look off the end of the porch, and through the trees, you could see this orange ball of light. And I mean, it was much smaller than a full moon, but it was certainly much larger than like an airplane light or whatever. And it was just kind of pulsing, and it moved across, came out from behind the trees, went across the clearing, in between the trees, and was just kind of pulsing and went over and then went out of sight. Okay? A couple seconds after that, one of the other guys, a friend of mine, Gary, he was standing against the railing looking back this way at this guy, and he goes, what is that? Is that a plane? Now, Gary's a very intelligent scientist. He's been in this field for a long time also. He knows what is and isn't a plane. And he goes, well, no, the lights are sparkling like that. Well, before we could get up and go out there to look back, he said it just went and like dispersed. Like all these little sparkly lights that he was seeing just like exploded and disappeared. Not a shooting star because it was stationary when he was seeing it. Right before that, actually the first thing we saw, let me back up. The first thing was one of the most spectacular shooting stars I've ever seen in my life. We sat down and we looked up, and it arced across the sky. Like that far, just this green, just all the way. It's like, oh, cool. So then I started drinking the scotch. And I didn't see anything else after that, but I thought, holy cow, if this is how this evening is going to start out, God only knows what's going to happen right out there on that patio. Okay, so you hear these kind of stories. I'm telling you, this was my story from when I saw 2 of the 3, and several of the other people out there saw all 3 of these strange objects. Okay, so if you, 9-ish, I guess. Yeah, yes. Not yet. Well, yeah, I just did. So, Arkansas State Director in the room. Yes, being a responsible researcher, I absolutely should do that. Yeah. But yeah, it was pretty good sighting. I mean, it wasn't a flying saucer, but the orange light was pretty cool. The moral of the story is go outside after these conferences, because if it's an indication that they're paying attention. There are some researchers who believe, because of their experiences, that you do not see a UFO unless they want you to. Take that and rattle it around in your head a little bit. Okay, and that actually came from Dr. Harley Rutledge. If you're familiar with him, he did research. He's a physics professor in Missouri. He did a lot of investigation in the 70s in the Piedmont flap in Missouri, and he told me that. He said he had come to the conclusion by sitting out and watching these things that you're not going to see them unless they want you to. Because I just told him, I don't think you're going to see them. If you see them, they know you're looking. He goes, no, let's take it a step further. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Did anybody else have a UFO sighting last night? Yes?
Not last night, but last month, all three of us sitting here saw the big orange glowing one, and we're wondering why all of a sudden the big orange glowing one is appearing in this area.
I don't know. It was pretty. It was pretty good. Like this, I was impressed by the size. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, but you could tell this was not a small object that was, I don't know, maybe a mile or two out, you know. But it was pretty cool looking.
And we weren't drinking scotch at the time.
What? Just to be fair, I hadn't started yet. Okay. Yeah, and so that's always, because actually somebody out there goes, when I go, we just saw a UFO, and they go, were you drinking? It's like, actually, when I'm drinking, I don't see UFOs. It's not a hallucinogen. Okay. All right, let's get started here. Our first presenter of the day worked as an RN in the neonatal unit of a busy Texas hospital for over 14 years before she was given a strange gift that changed her life. Quote, she says, I opened the box and there were two skulls inside. One was a normal human skull, but the other was so strange, I just took one look at it and thought, how did you survive? She noted that the thin, light bone of the skull and its strange shape were different from any deformity that she had ever seen in practice or in textbooks. She suspected that if it was human, it had survived a level of deformity that had never been survived before. I want to interject a little private story here about this. 1999, this is another thing to take note of about what you do at a UFO conference. 1999, I was here. It was after, the final speech on either Friday or Saturday, I don't remember which night. A couple of us were schlepping through the parking lot going to find some scotch or beer maybe, I don't know. And we were walking up to the parking lot, and this guy, basically unknown to me or the rest of us at that time, was pulling a small entourage of people with him, and he came by and he saw us and he goes, hey, come with me back to my room. I've got something interesting to show you. Okay. Now, after a long day of conferencing, that's one of those like, you're like, oh, I just want to go sit down and have a beer, And so we're like, okay, followed him back to his room. And the next thing I know, I'm holding this skull in my hand. It was Lloyd Pye. Well, I didn't know Lloyd Pye then. I mean, I do, God rest his soul. He pulls this thing out, and we're passing it out of the room, and I'm sorry, I had to do the, alas, poor Yorick. Okay, one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had at a UFO conference. So the moral of the story is, if some strange person grabs you and says, come back to my room, I want to show you something interesting, you say yes, okay? Now, the skull in question was found in Mexico in the 1930s. It was kept in a private collection until it was gifted to our next speaker in 1998. The skull shot to recognition in 1999 when UFO enthusiasts noticed that it looked like a skull of the so-called Greys. It has become known as the Star Child skull. So our next speaker is open to the possibility that this is an alien artifact. However, her goal is to explore any medical or scientific benefit of the skull first, and then to worry about where it fits into the human family tree. In 1999, a volunteer organization known as the Star Child Project began, seeking experts to examine the skull and to contract independent labs to conduct donation-funded testing ranging from simple X-ray to scanning electron microscope and DNA testing. They have published all the results and reports directly on the starchildproject.com website. And although some experts remain skeptical, many have gone on record with their conclusion that it is not human. And their expectation is that it will eventually be named as a previously undiscovered species. If it is accepted as a new species, the Star Child skull would represent a radical departure from the conventional timeline of humanoid life forms on this planet. Give a warm welcome to Melanie Young.
Thank you. Well, as you've heard, this was the second conference that the Star Child was introduced to in 1999. So if you were there, you actually had the opportunity to hold the real one. If you weren't, darn, sorry. As you're aware, I am a neonatal nurse and a massage therapist, and I specialize in anatomy. I love anatomy, which is the reason why it was given to me, because I'm crazy. So we found out that the star child is 900 years old. It's carbon dated, and it was found with a normal human skull, and this is a star child. And when I looked at it, I was like, what the heck? Or thereabouts. So, where do we go from here? Where did it come from? It came from Mexico, in the Chihuahua area. There's Juarez. Right across the street is El Paso, Texas, which is where I'm from. And so it came from right around in here by the Copper Canyon region, okay? Which today is, Copper Canyon's probably safe. Juarez is not, okay? So how was it found? It was found in a cave by a young girl who was told, she went down to visit family. A lot of El Pasoans have family in Mexico. She went down there and was told, don't go into the mines. They're not safe. Okay, these mines were actually used to mine silver and precious metals. Therefore, there were people in there that were still trying to stake out their claims. 1930s is when Pancho Villa was still around. Okay, it's not safe to do that. You tell a teenager not to do something. So she went exploring in the mines, of course. And this is what she found. She found the complete skeleton of a normal human laying on the ground. There was a small mound next to it, and in that there was a small, shallow grave. Coming out of that grave was this weird shaped hand. They were holding hands. Okay? This is a story. I wasn't there, but it's my story, so I'm sticking to it. So she dug up that shallow grave, and she found the complete skeleton of what we call now the star child. She says it was very small, very, very deformed. And then she decided, again, a misshapen skull and hand wrapped around the bone, and she decided, well, what do we do with it? I'm going to take it home. So she goes and gets a basket, and she carries it into the basket. And she takes it home and can't take it in because she's not supposed to be where she's at, much less have bones. So she hides it in the yard, probably behind a tree. Well, we're in the desert. When we have a little rain, it becomes a torrential rain, and all of the bones got washed down into a gully. The next morning, all she could find were skulls, because the other bones were so small, they just got washed away. Luckily, she was able to find the teeth. Okay, so the teeth aren't connected, but they go right here. Okay? That's where the maxilla is, and that's where our teeth are. And this is the normal skull that she found, and the teeth were intact. Now, you may ask why the lower teeth aren't there. That is the mandible. It's not connected to the skull, to a skull. It's connected by muscle and soft tissue. So you will never find a maxilla connected to a skull unless you're looking at a model and it's connected by springs. So that's what she found, and that's what I have. So what do I do with them? Do I leave them in a box for the next 30 years? Because that's how I found them. Well, I'm too curious. That's not going to happen. So my first thoughts were, either this is a major, major deformity that I've never seen, and that in and of itself needs to be researched, and it needs to go into medical books, because this thing lived long enough with this many deformities. We got to find out why. Or it's an alien hybrid. at the time, I was kind of getting into abductions and hearing all these stories about, oh, I had a baby with an alien. And so, it's like, oh, well, this is, all the rage. Maybe that's what it is. Because it's real bone. It's real bone. So I'm thinking, okay, how can it be alien and be real bone? So maybe it's a hybrid. Major historical value. Okay, you can't deny this anymore if that's what this is. Hello? UFO conferences are over. We have proof. So we need more research on it. Or it's completely alien. Major historical value. Again, stick it to the man, guys. We know for a fact this is, if that's what this is, they can't deny that Roswell happened, okay? Can't be denied any further, and I got the proof. You can't shut me up. Okay, so research it is. Now, I'm brand new. How? How do I do this research? Who do I do it with? When do we start? And where? Where does all this happen? I hate to be cliche-ish, but I'm just a little old neonatal nurse from El Paso, Texas. What do you do with this? So what did I do? I contacted our local MUFON community, and then they introduced me to Lloyd Pye. And if you've ever met Lloyd Pye, there you go. And it's a trip. It just so happened that I got the skull about a month or two before Lloyd Pye was scheduled to come in, and he was launching his book and his research on hominoids. And the book he had at the time was Everything You Know Is Wrong. Okay, and it had just come out. He had just self-published it. He was just starting his career in sticking it to the man and proving that human origins is not what we believe and what we think and what they're saying. So when we met him, our local chapter said, you've got to meet Lloyd. So we set up a schedule. He was coming in, he was going to speak at the local Holiday Inn. And we set up a time to meet him before his lecture. So I take the box, and we're going in, and it's in the Holiday Inn lobby. And they have picnic tables or patio lounges, and we, stupid us, we put up the umbrella indoors. And, we were like, okay, here's this box, don't show anybody. And so we opened up the box, and Lloyd's jaw dropped, immediately dropped. And he was like, what the heck? And, it took him about 2 to 3, 4, 5 minutes to catch his breath. And he said, I've never seen anything like this. And then he went on to say, this is not my field. I'm into hominoids and everything. And I was like, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but tell me what to do. What would you do? And he said, well, if I were ever to find a hominoid, a Sasquatch, I wouldn't do what the last guy did. And the last guy that he was telling us about, I can't remember his name, but basically he stuck a hominoid in a freezer and took it around in circus freak shows and charged 25 cents to see it. Okay, and he says, that's not what I would do. So he had a plan on how he would handle if he ever found a Sasquatch. And when I heard that plan, I knew that this is a guy I wanted to do this with. I wanted on my team. He volunteered, and at that point, he pretty much dropped his life and dedicated it to the Star Child. Okay? He never bought another. He had a batch of books that he was selling. He was just getting on the circuit, which is why nobody here knew who Lloyd Pye was when he was going through the parking lot. And so that's how it came to be. He would do his lecture on human origins and the hominoids and everything you know is wrong, and then he would slip people into his room and show them the Star Child. So that's how it got started, but he never republished that book or did a second thing because he started the Star Child Project. He gave everything up for that. And for that, I'm totally grateful. So So what is so unusual about this skull? Just the external shape, okay? The top is a normal human skull, the normal skull that was found with it. And the bottom is what we've named the Star Child. Can anybody see anything different about it? Just a few things that are different about it. Actually, there's 24 things that are different about it. First, the biochemical signature is much richer in collagen than the normal skull. The bone itself is half as thick as a normal human skull. It weighs half as much as a normal human skull. The surface of human bone has little holes in it, and that's where, when bone is growing and replaced, that's where the holes are that the bone cells come out of. The Star Child doesn't have those. I would tell you the name of it, but I forgot how to pronounce it. Okay, so the Star Child has a microscopic fibers in it that we have never seen before in any bone, mammal, fish, any bone, okay? Star Child has little tiny holes in it where our bone marrow would be, and it has red residue still in it after 900 years old, okay? When we die, there is absolutely nothing left in there because there's bacteria that eat that. So why is that still there, and what is it? The face is much smaller, okay? There are no brow ridges, therefore there's no eyelid. There's no place for an eyelid to be. The eye sockets are very unusually shaped. They're only 7.7 inches deep, where ours is 2 inches deep. The optic nerve, where the nerve and the blood vessels are, is on the bottom, and they're different shaped. The roof of the mouth is flat. Ours is curved. That's how come we can eat, and that's how we make different sounds. Cheekbones are much smaller, making the chewing muscles very small. But yet it ate the same stuff we did at the time. The ear holes are very low. But the inner ear is twice the size of our ears. You think it's going to have to hear differently? Where in space there is no sound? Interesting. The neck muscles, half as big as ours. But this thing is humongous, right? So how does it hold up that big head? There's no external inium or the occipital protuberance. If you'll feel on the back of your head, you've got a bump, okay? That bump, underneath that bump is where all of our neck muscles are, okay? Those are 2 inches thick. And if you ever have a good massage therapist and they can get in that, you'll love them, okay? But that's where all of the neck muscles, even the muscles of the upper back, your trapezius attaches there. Star Child doesn't have that. So how's it holding up that big head? However, there's an internal occipital protuberance. That's what holds your brain up. Okay? This one's still has it, but yet it's much smaller. But it's got an awful big brain. So how's that brain staying in there? Interesting. The rear of the head, very flat and very wide. However, this is not a result of cradle boarding. I think you've all heard of cradle boarding. You put a kid on a papoose board and the back of the head flattens. This doesn't flatten like that. It's much wider and flattened. There's a crease in the middle of the head, makes it kind of a heart-shaped. Nobody has that crease that I know of. I know a lot of people with a humongous heart, but not that. The brain capacity is 200 cc's more than the skull that was found with it. When you have 200 cc's different brain capacity, you have a different species. Neanderthal to Devanzio to us. There's 200 cc's difference. Okay? There are 2 rows of teeth, like a child, and actually, if I counted it, I count 3 rows. There's 1 down and 2 up, and I'll show you that. Okay? These teeth, the ones that are down, were worn as much as the skull that was found with it. So this thing lived and ate for some period of time like the skull that was found with it. It wasn't just coming to visit for a day or 2. It lived here. Okay, the brain size. This is the brain, our brain. Notice all this stuff down here. That's not brain. That is, that's bone, a lot of bone stuff. This part of the brain here is communication, our communication center. Okay? We don't communicate, obviously, like that one does. You can still see the veins that were going into the head. But this one has a little bit more veins. This back here, look how big that is. Okay? Let's go back to cradle boarding. This is what cradle boarding looks like. This is not cradle boarded, it's bumpy. When you lay this one flat on the table, it'll stand still on its back. This guy, he wobbles. You know, weebles wobble, he don't fall down. Okay? One of the first things we noticed, the very first test, we brought this out at the Laughlin conference, and we were able to take it over to New Mexico, University of Las Vegas. We did CT scans. This is a normal skull. What you're seeing right here are our sinuses. Okay? That's what makes the front of our head light. That's what gives us our tone. That's what gives us sinus infections. Okay? Notice the star child has absolutely none. Not even a little bit. That's only found in maybe 1% to 2% of the population. But even those that are found that we know of that are documented still have a little bit of something in there. This has nothing. So when we saw that, we thought slam dunk, nobody's going to question us. This is definitely alien. And of course, there's always somebody to say, none of that happens. Okay? So we've been trying to figure out how to make everybody believe that this is alien, and it's come right down to it. Till we get the full DNA, nobody's going to believe it. The next thing is the thinner bone. Okay, my husband and Lloyd actually cut this bone out in our backyard. So no, it wasn't under sterile conditions. So we weren't worried about contamination. So this is the normal skull. See how thick that is? And this is the star child. See how thin? The normal skull, we use just a regular Dremel blade, which is what we use in surgeries when we're doing osteo bone surgeries. We use a normal Dremel blade, Black & Decker, no big deal. Because I've had people on the internet say, why did you use a Dremel blade? You know, that's not medical. Yeah, it is. Trust me, I've seen it. I'm like, did we get that at Home Depot? And they're like, yeah. Okay. But when we cut the star child, we had to use a diamond bit blade. That's how difficult it was. When we went through with the normal blade, it just bounced right off. It just bounced right off. We were totally freaked out. When we cut open the normal skull, it smelled a little bit like tooth enamel. But when we cut into the star child, they were having not to gag and throw up. I mean, it was just horrible, okay? So something in there stinks to high heaven. I don't know what it is. Now, I told you about the fibers that we found in it. These are the fibers we found in it. We don't know what they are. Have no idea. We found these on an electron microscope. You can't see them with the naked eye, and you can't see them with just a, the kind of magnifying glass you have to use for the yellow pages. But we don't know what they are. they look like, or I'm assuming, and we're thinking maybe it's kind of like rebarb that holds it together. That's what makes it so strong. But we don't know. And we have not found anybody who's willing to donate their time and their expertise to get this out. Now remember, this is going back into 1999. There weren't instruments that were small enough to find these, to pull them out. I do know that there are instruments now, but we haven't been able to get a lab or anybody interested enough to pull them out and find out what they are. The red residue, okay? This is where our bone marrow would be. And we just, under the electron microscope, we thought, holy moly, what the heck is that? But it's red. So to me, I'm thinking it's red bone marrow. I don't really know for sure. Again, 1999, we didn't have the availability to get into this small space. Now we do. And I do know that because I have a friend of mine who used to work at Sandia. He says, oh yeah, we've got that stuff. Can I get Sandia to loan me some time and anybody to do that? Since Sandia deals with the government and all of that, top secret stuff, do you really think they're going to do that? But if you know of anybody who is in the laboratory environment and who would be interested, please don't hesitate to contact us. I'll be willing to give this sample or take it and watch them do the testing. The chemical composition, okay? This is normal. We use the companion skull with the star child. Okay, here's what our carbon is, way down here. Look at the carbon in this, way the heck up there. Here's the oxygen that's in the normal skull, and look at the oxygen up here. Okay, right down here is aluminum. We don't have aluminum in our system. Aluminum's been related to Alzheimer's. Look at how much aluminum is in the star child. I'm wondering if that might be what those fibers are. Just curious. Okay, I think, okay, here's calcium. We have more calcium than this does. And I can't figure out, here's the sodium, more sodium. Magnesium has less magnesium than we do. And I can't read the rest of those. But the chemical composition is so strange and so different that it just doesn't make sense that it would have lived long enough. Okay? Whatever species it is, it lived long enough that it's really interesting to me. Then we go to the eye sockets. Here's the normal one, 2 inches deep. This hole right here, this is where blood vessels, the nerves, the optic nerve goes through, right dead center in the back. And this one, half an inch deep, and look how low these are. Tells me it's going to see differently. The eyes are so much shallower. I don't see how it could have peripheral vision. And think about those neck muscles. How's that going to turn its head? But look at the shape, and it kind of wraps around the side. Anybody know what that reminds you of? Those wonderful almond-shaped eyes you hear about? Okay. Just interesting. Don't really have an idea of what it really is or what it could be. Here's another closer look. The foramens, dead smack in the middle, down at the bottom. Really interesting. This little hole here is your tear duct, or where nerves come out of, and this one's here. So it doesn't have a whole lot of nerves coming out to the face like we would have. Okay, here's the nose, and then here's the nose. Very small. Again, back to the foramens.
What's a foramen?
The hole. Okay, that's just a medical term for a hole. Okay? where something goes through. That's just a medical term. But what's interesting is this is where the optic nerve would be, and see how small our optic nerve is, and see how big theirs is. So it's going to tell us it's got to see differently. It has to have more nerve going in to see out of that little bitty eye. At least that's my take on it. Okay, it's got worn teeth. These teeth are down, and look how worn it is. Okay, even might have a little cavity there. It ate corn. It ate food of that region. The same food that other skull was eating. And here's the teeth. This is the teeth down. There's the second row. And there's the third row. We only have 2 rows of teeth. Now, some babies are born with a couple of teeth maybe. That's just due to the fact that their mom had a lot of calcium in the system. Those teeth fall out. It doesn't change the fact that it's going to have 2 rows of teeth, infant teeth and adult teeth. This kind of reminds me of a shark. You know, like if one tooth falls out, it just keeps. Now, is that true or not? I don't know. I'm just throwing out stuff. I don't know. And I really don't know. But that's the whole purpose of this. Let's find out. How many of you would like not to have braces and dentures and bridges? If we could figure out how this happens, do we think we could like make our smiles better? You know? And that's kind of what I'm in it for. That's the whole deal. This is Dr. Ted Robinson. He is the first physician who really took it seriously. And he had the skull for 2 years in Canada and took it to all of his friends. He is a facial reconstruction physician in Canada. That's what he looked like when we met him. And this is what he said. I'm not going to read it to you. It's on our website. But basically, in his experience of all of the stuff that he's done, worldwide study, this is a significant find. The deformities are significant, requiring more research. Okay, so far I've given you my opinion. Is this real science? Yes. And these are the doctors that are willing to put their names on it. We've taken it to Canada, we've taken it to the UK, we've taken it to Michigan, to BC, Vancouver, UK. We've had geneticists working on it. These last guys, these guys here actually are willing to put their name on the DNA testing that they did. Now that says something, and it says a whole lot. Basic DNA, there's 2 kinds. You've got mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is found outside of the nucleus. The easy thing to remember about mitochondrial is it starts with an M. That's from mom. Nuclear is from both parents. Okay? Everyone has mitochondrial DNA, it comes from their mom. Everybody has nuclear DNA, it comes from their dad. DNA wasn't even discovered until 1853. That's when we finally figured out, or we started to think about DNA. Wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s that we realized it was a double helix, that it had that winding thing. Human DNA wasn't completely done until 2003. So when we started doing our DNA testing back in 2000, the human genome hadn't even been completed. So it was still in its infancy stage. Thus far, we've been waiting for our scientists to catch up to what we have, which is why 15 years later, 16 years later, we don't have all the answers. So the base pairs are the steps. These guys, the base pairs. Those are the steps of the ladder, and that's what we need to find out what they are. Is this a new species? Human mitochondrial DNA has 16,000 plus pairs. They're very, very specific. There's very little room for variations. Between you and I, we can have 120 base pairs variations, and that's okay. 80 more variations are enough to make Neanderthal an entirely different species. The Neanderthal is not in our human, in my opinion, they're not pre-human, they're a different species, okay? So they're not in our evolutionary chain. Based on the DNA that we have so far, and we only have small pieces, we've recovered, if you take it all the way mathematically to the full thing, we have over 800 variations from the human and the star child. The star child has 800 variations more than what we are allowed to have. So that's pretty interesting, okay? The number of mitochondrial base pair variations, humans, we can have 120. Neanderthals have 200 more than we do. Dianzieva, which is another pre-human that just recently came into being, has 385 different than us. The star child is going to come out to be around 800 to 1,000 different variations. And a chimpanzee is 1,500 variations, okay? So, different species, okay? 1910, mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA were recovered. And that's significant because to get nuclear DNA out of something this old is like a miracle. But we got it. We sent it through the national database. The national database has all the DNA samples that have been found thus far. We set the parameters as loosely as we could. In other words, if it matches anything in there, if anything is close to it, tell us what it is. So it comes back, and this is the actual report, no significant similarities. No significant similarities found in the national database. I think that's interesting, don't you? And we still have people saying it's human. Now, how can they say that? Because we don't have the complete genome. Because we don't have, we're not able to duplicate the complete genome. We don't have peer review papers. So until all of that happens, we're going to have naysayers. Okay, so they're going to be all over the web saying, the star child's fake, or it's human, or we even have people on our website saying that. And I'm not going to take them off. Everybody's allowed their own opinion. One of these days I'll be able to take them off and say, not true. Now, one of the strands that we have in our DNA is called the FOXP2. The FOXP2 is a very important gene. Amongst us, there is no variation in any human in the FOXP2 gene. It's what is really great and good for our communication skills. It has to do with speech, hearing, language. The star child, so far what we have found on our FOXP2, and we just have a small strand of it, but so far there are 56 different variations. 56. So this is telling us that this thing, if it were human, should not have even been born, because there are no variations in any of our FOXP2s. They're all exactly the same. So it shouldn't have even been born. So here's the variations between FOXP2 and other animals. The monkeys, the rhesus monkey, there's 2 differences, 2 variations. A mouse, you can have 20. Our dogs have 27 different variations, which might explain why my dogs will not quit barking. I just realized that. Yeah, barking variations, and maybe their hearing too. Okay? Elephants have 21. Well, they hear through their feet, I just heard. Animal Planet. Possum's 21. A frog is 26. The star child is way the heck up here at 56. Is it related? I don't know, you figure it out. I have my opinion. So, that being said, how can some DNA be human-like, and some not be like anything found on this earth? Well, let's just look at the percentages. Chimpanzees, they have 96% of the same DNA you and I have. Cats, 90%. Fruit flies, 60%. And yeast, 26%. So next time you eat a piece of bread, just realize it's cannibalism. Okay? Because you're eating human DNA. So when people say it's human because it has human DNA, that doesn't really truly make any sense. Because if it lived here, in our universe consists of pretty much the same or similar proteins, chemicals, elemental stuff. Well, guess what? If it came from this universe, it's going to have some of the same things. So if it's from this area, guess what? It's going to have some of the similar properties. So that explains why there is some commonalities. Okay, just, be careful. Don't eat your yeast. But how can this happen? Can there be so many mutations? Well, heck yes, we can make this in the lab. You can make this in the lab. There's not a problem. But does it live? It doesn't live. The star child lived long enough for it to grow teeth and eat. It's not human. It's not a human deformity. If anybody wants to throw out a deformity at me, I'll explain it away. I'm okay. I'll give you the reasons why it's not that. You can put any combination of DNA together in a lab, but for it to live and fit in the parameters enough to survive, it has to be something different. It can't be human. And how do I know that? I know that from my experience in the neonatal unit. You can have two deformities, two bone deformities, and survive. You can have 3, and you might live to be 3 years old. Might. And I've seen that happen. Any more than that, you don't make it out the birth canal. That's why you have miscarriages. Because you will not survive. This one has 24 bone differences just in the skull. It doesn't happen that way. It can't be Down syndrome. Down syndrome is just an extra chromosome on the 13th pair. This has got 56 variations on the FOXP2. Can't be. It can't be progeria. Progeria is where kids age real fast. Well, that's also, their bones get real brittle. This bone is much stronger. Okay? It can't be cradle boarded because there's way too much and it's way too flat. It can't be hydrocephalic. Hydrocephalic is water on the brain. Well, hydrocephalic people, kids, their heads balloon up like basketballs, and when they passed, their skull bones aren't connected. So those are some of the main things we get as trying to explain it away. It can't be. It can't be. Okay? So what does this really look like? Look familiar? Okay, this is just one variation, one forensic variation that's been reconstructed. If you want to go onto our website, you can see a bunch of other ones. We've had clay reconstructions done by forensic specialists, and when we asked them, how in the world did you put a normal human eyeball in this thing? You know what he said? I just cut it in half. When you try to get humans to do some sort of reconstruction or artwork on something this different, this otherworldly, it has to be filtered through human eyes. So a lot of the artist renditions of what it looks like is filtered through human eyes. They put hair on it. They make the eyes look normal. They try to make it fit into the parameters of what they think the indigenous people of that area would look like. But remember, it's all being filtered through our eyes and our paradigm. Now, one thing about they've recently found out is that astronauts who have been in space for a month or longer, their eyeballs and their eye sockets start to flatten. Okay? And that's due to zero gravity, and they think so what we're thinking is, if the eyeballs of humans start to flatten after being 1 month in zero gravity, do you think that might be why these are flattened? Even though this thing lived on this earth, if it's not genetically from this earth, then maybe genetically speaking, it was designed that way. Very, very interesting stuff to think about. Okay? They're closest to the eyes after being, 6 months in gravity. So this probably spent some time in there. Could this be alien bone marrow? I definitely think it's probably something that's not from this earth, because our bacteria won't eat it. Maybe it just doesn't taste good. I don't know. My dogs probably would suck it out, but who knows? Okay. Remember, when we die, there are bacteria of death that eat away everything. And over time, they'll even eat away bone. Okay? How many of you have even heard of the Star Child before today? Where'd you hear about it? Lloyd Pye, my buddy, huh? We've been everywhere, okay? How many of you have heard of me before today? Okay? Oh, Donald, I love you. We've been on all of these different shows. You can catch us. I try to catch me as often as I can. It's like, oh, that's me. That's when I was skinny. That's when my hair wasn't gray. Lloyd passed away in December of 2013. I'm sorry, I still cry about him. He was my dear friend. He was like a brother to me. And we're trying to keep it going. So bear with me. We're trying to keep it going. This last year, 2 years have been really rough. But we're trying. So, his website is still on the web page. He has a web page, lloydpye.com. His family's still keeping it up. They have a memorial fund where they are a grant fund, and they are granting people who are doing alternative research. If you are in that field and you are looking at that, you should probably contact them through lloydpye.com. His goal when we finished this, and if we had come into any money, would be, his goal was to set up a retreat for people in this arena to go to write their books to get away from the pressure, a place for a sanctuary for researchers. If this ever comes to fruition, we will do that for him. And we are looking at developing a college bachelor's degree for alternative research and stuff. So we're looking into that, and we will follow through with that if this ever comes to fruition. So what do we do now? Without Lloyd, it's been like we've been lost. But we finish this thing. That's the main thing. We continue the research. Testing is currently on hold until we can raise the funds. There's really nothing more we can do. The main thing is the DNA. DNA, when we started looking at this, we researched it out, and the only people that could do the DNA were like the people that did DNA on Lucy, the Iceman. That was over in Europe, and we were looking at $7 million at the time. Plus, getting them to want to do something like this because this is so freaky weird. So, technology's come down, the cost has come down. So what we're looking at, we actually have a lab that is willing to consider us if we come up with the money. And what we're asking is to come up with somebody or a group of people who are willing to come up with $250,000 for a minimum of 2 years. And what the lab is saying is we don't have to have a contract for the complete genome. We'll have a contract for 1 year of work. If after 1 year we're figuring out that, okay, everything I've just told you isn't true, it's probably human, then we're done and we move on. But if they realize and they're willing to admit that I'm right, then we need another $250 for the next year and maybe another year to get the complete genome. You may be asking why it's costing so much and why can't we just run it through with every other mother who wants to find out who their daddy is. The reason is it's 900-year-old skull. We don't need contamination, and it has to be done in a specific lab, in a specific environment, so it has to be run separately, okay? Now, why do we care? Why should anyone care? This has never been about proving that aliens are real. I, personally, have never been egotistical enough to think that we're the top of the food chain, okay? I've never thought God had this little imagination. So, it's not about proving aliens are real. It's always been about what made this thing live long enough to eat, and how can that help humanity? If what we find can save one genetically defected infant that I've helped die, then all this is for naught. Then this is worth the money to get the DNA testing. They have already found genes in mice, genetic liver disorders that kill mice. They've been actually able to find a normal gene for that normal gene, and manipulate that gene and insert it into a mouse with that gene defect and cure liver disorders. Okay? So this is right here, right now, this is happening. So just some ideas on how this could help us. The bone's thicker. How many women have osteoporosis? We're shrinking, guys. I don't want to shrink. I can't tell you how many birth defects I think this could cure. Autoimmune disorders. If that bone marrow is still around, that's going to affect the autoimmune disorders. AIDS, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, okay? Hearing and eyes. Any hearing aids? Glasses? okay? Speech disorders, FOXP2. You think it would be wonderful if people who were mute and deaf, you know, Helen Keller, my God, what a wonderful woman. Wouldn't that be nice if she didn't have to go through all of that? Speech disorders. The list goes on and on and on. If you can think of something, I have a sneaking suspicion this is the answer. And I cannot for the life of me understand why society is not jumping the gun. How can you help? I bet you nobody in here has $500,000, okay? And I'm not asking for that. If you have some time and you want to help, just ask me. I will give you a job, okay? There are so much things that need to be done. If you have money you would like to donate, or you have a little extra $15, I've got t-shirts for sale. They may not fit you, because I only have 4 left, but a $15 t-shirt will buy me 1 base pair, okay? We have things for sale. If you have some knowledge, you know, if you would love to get on the debunker site and tell them to shut up because you know something they don't know, I'd love it, okay? I would love for you to do that. Please tell everybody you know. Tell your physician. You know, you're an idiot. Hello. We've got something here that can help that. You know, anybody that you can talk to. The more people you know that we can get their butts in these seats to learn what we're learning today, the better off the world will be. We're looking for investors to give us $250,000 for 3 years to contract, to commit to that. We may not need that. We may only need $250,000 to say, okay, Melanie, you're full of crap. Shut up and go away. Or we may need more. If you know of anybody who can help us, contact us at starchildproject.com or contact starchildproject.com. That's our email. Okay? We do have some products for sale, and you've seen them. We have the resin replicas, which on the internet are $250. Show price today, I haven't told anybody on my team, is $125. We have 3D laser cubes. They're $50 on the internet. Again, show price today, they're $50. I mean, $25, $50. Okay, limited supply here at the conferences. And we do have t-shirts for sale, and they're $15. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Hello, come back, come back. Oh well, life goes on. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Yes, ma'am.
What's a laser cube?
If you'll come down, it's just a little block of ice, glass, and inside the laser, inside it's got a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional image of the star child.
Melanie, I
Thank
thought
you.
that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I was on a website called beforeitsthenews.com. I think that website is being used to release to the public a lot of stuff. Maybe some disinformation there. I recently saw a whole list of different species, dozens of them, being shown the images of and being described by somebody who probably doesn't know everything there is to know about that, but I'm sure I saw an image of the star child. I don't know whether it's a drawing or an actual photo, but a lot of those are actual photos of different ET species. And I think you should contact those people and research where that image of the star child with the flesh and all on it came from. I think it'd be a good use. I recognize that site is being used by many nations to release their previously classified videos of all the ETs that were on the crashed vehicles that landed in their country. You can spend a lot of time learning stuff on that website, but there's something for you to learn about the star child there, I think.
Okay, I'll definitely check that out. Oh, one other thing I just want to let you guys know. Our geneticist, who we cannot disclose because livelihoods, he might lose his job and his income and his reputation, but he's also working with the elongated skulls and Brian Foster. So our team is in conjunction with some of these other people out there, okay? Just to let you know. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much. This was very informative. I'm a cryptologist, and one of the things that convinced me that there was God, a real God, is that DNA is very, very complex. To put it in perspective, if you have 250 base pairs, that's a quaternary type numbering system. You're talking about a number that is large enough to count every particle in the universe. And to say that, oh, this was just an accident of chance or a simple mutation, it just does not wash.
Yeah.
And also, to raise the money, I would recommend one of the crowdfunding sites.
We did do a Indigo project.
Thank you.
We just didn't, we're all volunteers. We didn't know what we were doing, so we're still in the process of figuring that stuff out. Yes, sir.
Kickstarter.com is another one of those sites, and I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment that through sources learning about things like Project Blue Book and I guess interplanetary exchange students, I guess is a good way to put it. It reminds me of what I've seen as an Eben, which is a type of race that is cataloged through the Blue Book, 91 something. And I just wanted to know if you knew anything about that, or you had an information, or anybody's.
I've never heard of EBIMs at all, so no,
Okay,
I
thank
don't know about that.
Very good presentation,
Thank
by the
you.
way. Very informative. I'm learning more about this, and I know it's something you've been doing a lot of. L.A. Mazzulli has done a lot of research with the elongated skulls in Peru. Have you worked or talked with him much?
With
L.A. Mazzulli and the elongated skulls in Peru and his research?
Yeah, Lloyd is aware of that, but I really, I've been grieving for Lloyd, so I'm hoping now that I'm getting over that, I'm going to start looking in more with that. I'm going to actually contact Brian Foster, who's very into the elongated skulls, and see if there's anything we can hook up and do together and learn more about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. One other thing I'm going to beg, if you guys know of anybody who needs somebody to come and speak, or if you can help get the word out that I'm ready and able and willing to come and speak and do anything, radio shows, anything, please let them know, and they can always contact me through the Star Child Project at starchildproject.com. Anything else? Well, I really appreciate it. This conference is wonderful. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.